Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And that brings us to a title which has been designated by Criterion at spine number 1231. This is a work which is described as being from the year 1979, and the name of the filmmaker is Albert Brooks. And the name of the work is, excuse me, Real Life. The highly spirited, wonderfully relevant, and very funny, and odd and quirky, and so filled with this humorous, idiosyncratic type of viewpoint of a slice of life Americana and film, and indeed sort of in a prescient way reality TV or reality film in the way, while of course being a wonderful example, and indeed the first feature film example of the genius of the filmmaker artist who is involved here. And that filmmaker artist is Albert Brooks. And Albert Brooks is the director of this film, and it's also Albert Brooks is also one of the co-writers of this film, together with Monica Johnson and Harry Shearer. And Albert Brooks is also a member of the cast. Albert Brooks portrays a character who is called Albert Brooks. And other members of the cast include Francis Lee McCain and Charles Grodin and others in this work, which is piercing. It is, as I say, very strange, wonderfully strange. It has that great absurdist Albert Brooks humor lens, which is so on point every single time. And it has those types of jokes that are direct and hit immediately types of jokes, the sort of direct impact type of humor. And also there are those jokes that land, but they take time to linger and grow, and almost the humorous venom, or the venomous humor, festers in a way that just the more time is added, the more absurdity is compounded, thus making the situation then the comedy that's compounded and all the same, all the funnier in that great Albert Brooks humorous way that he has displayed in so many films, and this being his first feature film as a director, and it is this film, which is Real Life. Real Life from 1979. The Criterion Collection and the works of Albert Brooks, I mean, they go hand in hand very nicely. There are a number of Albert Brooks directed features that find themselves in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog in some really great and not just serviceable releases, but really wonderful, robust releases, showcasing, among other things, and among the great talents that are involved, the very concentrated and very intelligent, laser-focused humor of Albert Brooks. And so it's nice to see this year, 2024, the latter half of 2024, we get more Albert Brooks directed films. And this being his first film feature as a director and co-writer, and also as a star. He portrays a character, a filmmaker or an artist named Albert Brooks. And it is a wild and such a great over-the-top, almost grotesque portrayal in this great comic way, poking fun at this type of persona, which is producing or is endeavoring to produce this program, which is aiming to use various cameras and various forms of camera technology to capture in a day-to-day documentary style to capture the days and lives of the members of a quote-unquote typical American family in Phoenix, Arizona. And this is the Yeager family, who is portrayed by Charles Grodin and Francis Lee McCain and then others. So there's the husband and the wife and the children. And so Albert Brooks comes in there and he is setting up these cameras, and the house is all set up, and they are going to endeavor, he will endeavor to make a film or catalog their lives over the course of minutes, days, weeks, months, and to endeavor to create this work of art, which is, I think, I mean, very clear. It is a film that's made in 1979, but it's very much patterning and indeed foreshadowing this phenomenon of what is oftentimes referred to as reality TV. So it is very prescient in that way, although it has a really sound and a very strong focal point of sort of contextual basis in terms of a program known as American Family, and we'll talk a little bit about that later in this video discussion very briefly. But that's one point to keep in mind, and then the other point to keep in mind as a kind of setting up of the general context of the film is that the conceit or the story or the structure of the film is set up like a documentary, but it is a faux documentary. So this is not a real life Albert Brooks making a film about the real life family of the Yeagers. You know, these are actors portraying these people who are then in the world of the film making this documentary. So the phrases that are often used perhaps to describe this kind of film is a false faux documentary, a mockumentary, because it's a faux documentary that is done in a very comedic comedy style. And also, it is a type of a drama within drama type of situation, and so this also, I think, fuels the conceit further of the sort of intrusiveness of the documentary and sort of quote unquote reality TV on the one hand, and we see the psychological turmoil and almost the damage and the toil that is taken, that is really being, the slings and arrows that are really being absorbed and endured by the members of these family, in particular Charles Grodin character and the Francis Lee McCain character in their own way. But this is where, I mean, this is one of many points where the film not just shines and blossoms, but really explodes in a type of creative ingenuity, because what we have is a number of, one can say, beautifully hyper realized renditions of, let's say, elements that are, and when I say hyper realized, I mean they are very much over the top on the one hand and kind of brimming almost to a boil, or simmering to a boil, that are just about ready to, like a powder keg of explosion, that are about to occur, and that explosive nature then combines together in this sort of whimsical type of way. And then we have, spearheading the project, Albert Brooks, the artist or the producer, the filmmaker, who is also himself intruding upon the lives of this family. Because we have the whole setup of the conceit with the selection of the family, which itself is this laborious and weird and strange process. We have the actual project itself, which is, it has a sense of fascination to it, especially from the point of view of the viewer. But we also see the way in which the world of the film pokes back at us and reminds us that this is, they are being filmed, and they are aware that they are being filmed, and so there's a sense of imperfection that is captured while quote unquote capturing, and there are balloons here, capturing real life in terms of sort of the furthering of the conceit of the film. So this is one fascinating way where the mockumentary style, I think, is really being explored in this a very funny way. And we have, as I say, this over-the-top, almost gross caricature of the artist who will do whatever it takes, almost to the point of no return, do whatever it takes to try to achieve this goal of creating this American masterpiece. And so we have Albert Brooks in this role of a character who is, I mean, from a certain perspective, might be described as being quite motivated and quite determined to get what he wants. But also, he might be seen to be incredibly manipulative and almost maybe perhaps from a certain point of view, somewhat slimy, underhanded, and also maybe too deluded and quite unaware, or perhaps totally insensitive to the psychological toils that his endeavors are definitely bringing with it, especially as he becomes more and more involved with almost to the point of total and complete intrusion, more and more involved with the family and the family matters. And that is just one side of one coin of this film. And another side of another coin of this is the family, the subject matter of this documentary that's being made. And so we have Charles Grodin's character and Francis Lee McCain's character. And we see almost from the outset different temperatures in the room. One person might be somewhat eager to be filmed over the course of this long period of time, while the other might be quite reluctant to have to share so many details of their lives with people who will end up watching this. Not least of which, of course, to share these details, these intimate moments with the crew, Albert Brooks and company. So it starts out perhaps in terms of being aware of being filmed, but maybe there's a type of guarded sensibility of the characters that in itself trying to externalize or pretend to be just living a normal day, but in fact it's quite guarded. So there's already this really interesting, quite wonderfully bizarre construct of trying to capture real life but putting on a show in certain scenes, which itself is, I think, inherently very humorous. And then there are some moments in the film where some of those maybe barriers of the people that are being filmed break down, and there's some really fascinating scenes early on where, for instance, the wife. Jeanette is really, really angry and really annoyed, and there are some things that she says out in the open in the dining room table to her husband, Warren, that she probably wouldn't say otherwise. So it's almost this interesting twist on the whole point of, or the conceit of capturing quote unquote real life in this documentary fashion. It's almost as though there are moments where the reality is guarded, but then there are other moments when the guard is let down to the point where perhaps the characters are showing things that they would not otherwise show had the cameras not been there. So there's this interesting play on the idea of knowledge of the camera being there and trying to put on a show, but then letting one's guard down at sort of unexpected times, which itself is a brilliant rendition because it shows the sort of absurdity of this type of project, which itself, the absurdity is also highlighted by the absurd nature of not just Albert Brooks's brilliant over-the-top performance, but also the way in which he is trying to capture reality here. You know, he goes to great lengths trying to set up the house in this cul-de-sac area, this residential area. One house is the house of the family, and then there's another house in this cul-de-sac which is for him and the crew, and so he has to run back and forth in this almost silent film comedy way, and have to deal with, say, extras and also setting up the scenarios, as well as dealing with the sort of the backroom crew details, and also the psychologists and the producers, and what it is they are trying to see, how it is they're maybe putting up certain impediments to Albert Brooks's project, or maybe they're adding more challenges which themselves compound absurdity upon absurdity, thus creating this almost a tower that's about to topple over. were it not for the sheer will of Albert Brooks, whose willpower, by the way, extends into areas and boundaries of not just whimsy, but just almost. Almost a sort of show person like mentality that almost loses its grip on reality. Which is itself a known kind of irony, losing a grip on reality in an endeavor to try to show reality or real life, which is a great twist on the conceit, and just showing the level upon level of how clever Albert Brooks and company, their humor is. So this is one aspect. Another thing too is the over the top nature of the intrusive nature of the technology that's employed itself. So again, this is a documentary or a faux documentary or a false documentary or fake documentary film. But we also are privy to how the family is being photographed over the course of, again, days and weeks and months. And so the the cameras, we see panel cameras that themselves are, it's meant to be attached to the room. So the idea that people, the family, will be videoed or filmed in their rooms in each of the rooms of the house. And also there's this helmet camera that is like a deep diver's helmet, but it's with a state of the art technology, and it's like something out of sort of a mixture between maybe Jacques Cousteau on the one hand and David Cronenberg on the other. It's a really quite a wonderfully disjointed, out of place. Another example of the over the top absurdity that is again represented by Albert Brooks' sheer willpower and drive to try to get things done no matter what the cost. And as I say, the human drama elements also unfold in oftentimes very unexpected ways. And so we see sort of the psychological dilemmas twist and turn, and certain questions and certain, say, propositions are made to Albert Brooks and from Albert Brooks that sometimes take a really strange and bizarre, wonderfully strange and bizarre turn. And then leading to a more and more sort of mishap and maybe psychological injury that that leads down a kind of outrageously funny, over the top path of destruction, for lack of a better phrase. So, real life, there is so much here to ponder. There's so much here to sort of consider and chew on. And as I say, there is this is a film that was made in 1979, so it has that wonderful sensibility. There's a 1970s, late 1970s Americana that is being presented almost like a postcard, sort of the wonderful sunshine lit postcard of the American suburbia on the one hand, but then you realize that there are scratches on the surface, or perhaps the postcard is about to burst into flames as we watch it, and that great Albert Brooks wink to the camera, tongue in cheek, and sly reference, and just direct, full bodied approach, humor on the one hand that also has the ability to linger and to have a long lasting effect on the other. So there is and as I say, at the start of this, there is, to sort of bring this conversation back home, there is this uh, brilliant foresight of this film and Albert Brooks and company to again bring us to, over the years since this film was made, and how the reality TV scenario is indeed something that has become a popular genre or subgenre, even all the way up to present day. And so the documentary capturing that, and there is a lot to be said too about what happens in front of the camera in those documentaries or the reality TV shows, and what happens behind the scenes, and sometimes the behind the scenes stuff in those it's a documentary and we see the behind the scene. A documentary itself is, I think, meant to show the quote unquote behind the scenes, but it brings it to the fore, and it itself is a type of show. So the behind the scenes of the behind the scenes, it itself very fascinating, and I think real life touches upon those, or not just touches upon, really dives deeply into that type of examination, while being so funny and so on the nose and vicious and absurd and wild all at once. Uh, Albert Brooks, the works of Albert Brooks, as I might have mentioned, Criterion has done so well, I think, to release as many Albert Brooks directed films as possible into the physical media catalog fold. And so it's wonderful, really wonderful to have this introduced in the collection. So this is the film which is Real Life. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Real Life, courtesy of this 4K UHD plus Blu-ray release this year, 2024. It's at spine number 1231. And I have the 4K UHD disc in the player. So it's a 4K UHD disc and then the Blu-ray disc. And as per customary with these types of releases from Criterion, we have the film available on the 4K UHD disc and also the film available on the Blu-ray disc with certain specifications tailored to the particular format. And then for the supplements, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this video, the supplements can be found on the Blu-ray. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But before we get to that, let me turn our attention, if I may, to the 4K disc. I have the 4K disc in the player, as I've mentioned, and so here it is. I've turned down the volume, but we have this image, this very iconic image of the one of the pieces of technology that are being used, or that is being used here in this film. Very, very wonderful, funny, bizarre image here from Real Life. It's great. This is what I said. Or what did I say? Sort of a mix between Jacques Cousteau and David Cronenberg. But anyway, I have the 4K disc in the player just to showcase that, and also let me take this opportunity to talk a brief bit, about the transfer, the master, or the restoration, because according to the fold-out insert, which is part of the Criterion release, it says about the master, and I quote, "Real Life is presented in the aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1, supervised and approved by director Albert Brooks. This new 4K restoration was created from the 35mm original camera negative. The original monaural soundtrack was mastered from the 35mm magnetic track by the Criterion Collection. The feature is presented in HDR high dynamic range on the 4K Ultra HD disc and high definition SDR standard dynamic range on the Blu-ray." So I've seen this film a number of times before this Criterion release. I'm a great admirer of this and also of the work of Albert Brooks, this being a really great example of this, but of his work. But I'm limited in terms of my knowledge. Not just limited, I am next to nothing in terms of my knowledge and grasp of the sort of release history of this film. I've never had the opportunity, unfortunately, to see this film in the theater, for example. So my frame of reference, I think, is quite narrow. Maybe overly narrow in scope for your satisfaction. I apologize if you feel that way, but I have experienced this film, and on many occasions prior to the Criterion release. And what I love about this, it's a 4K restoration, and it looks really, really great, and it looks like a film from 1979. I don't know if that makes any sense. It doesn't feel overly produced and overly quote unquote cleaned up, and end quote. There are it feels like it has the color palette is preserved where it needs to be preserved. Where the color palette has been filmed as a kind of bland take on a sort of American suburbia, it has a sense of being bland, purposefully so, where the film goes to these almost laboratory type places. It has this type of antiseptic quality, and there's also the clutter of sort of office space, and there's also the absurdity of technology and the lines and the contours. And so I like that sense of a kind of watching something that you know is given the 4K treatment, but it doesn't feel like it's overly produced in that capacity. It feels like it is preserving or maintaining or keeping intact that kind of 1979 tactile feel to it, which I really admire and appreciate. So I don't know if that I mean I say it very much well, I say it 100% as a compliment. Which is that I almost didn't feel like it was a 4K restoration. You know, there's always this thing where, or at least for me anyway, I see a film that is advertised when it's being sold. It's advertised as being a 4K restoration of a film that I've seen so many times, and I can feel when I see it, it feels like it's sharper, or cleaned up, or it's like it's a film like I've never seen it before, that kind of thing. So I'm experiencing a new with this release of real life. I feel like the film is as I've always known it in this way. So it feels like the restoration itself was this wonderfully invisible thing, and I think that is a very strong compliment. You know, it doesn't feel itself overly intrusive and going in one direction or another. At least I feel that way, and so I am. Again, from my subjective viewpoint experience and very limited capacity in terms of my grasp of the technical details of these sorts of things, I enjoyed it very much. Okay, so now I have the Blu-ray in the player. So once again, let's remind ourselves. So we have the two discs. That's part of this Criterion release, the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray release. So the 4K UHD disc, which was what I had before, and then the Blu-ray disc, which is what I have here now. And so you can watch the film also on the Blu-ray. And I've seen the film, courtesy of this Criterion release. I've seen it a number of times already on the 4K disc, and I've seen it a number of times on the Blu-ray disc, and I enjoyed myself immensely. Regardless of the format that was my choice at the time of watching it. So, but I have the Blu-ray here because the 4K disc will not have the supplements as part of its offerings on that disc. If you want to go for the supplements, you have to go to the Blu-ray, and so that's what I have here. And again, the same image of the wonderful camera operator with the wonderful camera Hettenauer is right here to greet us when you put the disc in the machine. And I scrolled on, and again, please accept my deepest apologies for my very bad YouTube video making presentation skills. I hope you can forgive me. But if you can't forgive me, you know, I'm still sorry all the same. I very much am. I'm not really good at this sort of thing, but I'm doing my very best. And so let's go to the supplements. Now we have three supplements, and the first is Albert Brooks, the second is Francis Lee McCain, and the third is 3D Trailer. So usually with the Criterion supplements Blu-ray on the Blu-ray menu, you press the supplement and it'll take you to a little write-up of what that supplement is, which has, and I tend to, as part of these video discussions, if I'm able to, press it, and then it'll take me to a little submenu, and I'll read or quote from what the Criterion disc says. Unfortunately, when I press, unfortunately, but when I press, for instance, Albert Brooks, it won't give me one of those write-ups. It'll go straight to the discussion with Albert Brooks. The same with Francis Lee McCain. If I press the name, it won't give me a descriptive. At least my disc won't. It'll just go straight into the supplement. When I press 3D Trailer, however, there will be a little brief descriptor that comes up. So we'll talk about that in a moment. So that's an interesting detail. You know, I've only seen that, I think, well, it does happen every now and again. I think it happened, let's see if memory serves, I think it happened with the Todd Browning, some of the films that were found on the Todd Browning uh, uh, multi-film set that was released. And I think I made a note of that when I talked about that Criterion release. So I personally prefer it if there's a little bit of a write-up. It's fun. It adds even further context to what it is we're about to see. But that's okay because it doesn't take away from the supplements themselves. So the first one is Albert Brooks, and this is a one-on-one conversation with Albert Brooks. And it seems done very recently. And this is Albert Brooks on Real Life. It's approximately 30 minutes. And so here Albert Brooks talks about a little bit of his background and in terms of giving some brief details of his work as a comedian leading up to his opportunity to write and direct and appear in this film Real Life. And so references made to some of his almost kind of sort of comedy art installation show type of approach to things. So sort of Albert Brooks' famous School of Comedians, and how this was published, and how this was an example of him to almost turn the eye on the absurdity of the focusing in on the process of comedy. How do you how do you be funny, or how do you become funny? You follow these steps, 10 steps to becoming a comedian, or that sort of thing. So and Albert Brooks, again, in this conversation, he acknowledges that he finds that sort of thing very funny. He wants to draw attention to it, very innocently poke fun at it. And so we have examples of that as a kind of installation art piece, comedy piece, or a written piece in terms of its publication. Uh, what are some what is the meaning of comedy? Choose multiple choice A, B, C, or D. That kind of questionnaire. That's also part of that package. So, and it's also leading into a little bit of a conversation about some of the endeavors that he made in terms of short films, in terms of Albert Brooks' famous School of Comedians, and also National Audience Research Institute, etc., and how it almost had him. He caught, in a manner of speaking, he caught the bug in terms of wanting to explore in the realm of film, and he ended up getting his chance with becoming the writer and then director of this film, Real Life. And speaking of the circumstances of becoming the writer and director and star of Real Life. And he does go into those details about Warner Brothers, and there was a little bit of an interim period where David Geffen was the head of Warner Brothers, and there was the opportunity to create this story together with Monica Johnson and Harry Shearer, who, by the way, appears in the film as well in a very funny role. And so and then even though there was a bit of a turnover in terms of leadership at Warner Brothers, or during the time of trying to get this film off the ground, or the time of making this film, it still was able to be made. There's some talk a little bit later in this conversation about how the film didn't necessarily find the greatest, say, commercial success when it was released, but he told the story that he told, and it has this long lasting life, well beyond its initial almost shelf life date of the initial release of 1979, because, as I said, it's touching upon and making fun of things that are just so present even right now. You can go and find this type of reality TV show on practically any channel that is on offer for you. So it's really quite a miraculous thing, just how 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 much staying power this has. And so and that Albert Brooks not only had his finger on the pulse of that, but he was really essentially trying to his focus on comedy is a kind of deconstruction of comedy, as he himself describes it, which is a really great thing. And also he talks about the Louds, which is the family that was the focus of this program, an American family, which is referenced a lot in the supplements, and also in the essay, which is included as part of the Criterion release. And that I think cannot be overstated enough. This actual example of a program or a work that was trying to actually, there was an actual documentary called An American Family, which was trying to capture the lives of the American family in this way that real life is essentially poking fun at. And that was a sort of a really important jumping off point. And I think Albert Brooks and others might have mentioned that it was very likely that people who contemporaneously saw or attended, say, the screenings of Real Life back in 1979 would have likely have known or perhaps have heard of American Family. So I think that's a really important contextual detail to include, which is great. Also, the idea of just making fun of this, or really almost turning on its head this notion of trying to capture real life. And Albert Brooks mentions the purposeful use of using his own name. I mean, Albert Brooks is right, the name that is used for the name of the main character of this film. But it is Albert Brooks, the actor, the performer, portraying a character named Albert Brooks. So the line between quote unquote reality and fiction is already quite blurred. And so there's the possibility of some people watching this film and maybe even thinking that it is a real thing because, among other things, it's it's an Albert Brooks film featuring someone who is Albert Brooks, who is called Albert Brooks. So that's, I think, a really a wonderfully great and twisted detail that just adds the even more contextual layers to this, which is great. Really, really great. He also mentions too, there's a scene a little bit early on in the film, sort of the tryouts section of the film, where he mentions how his brother, Albert Brooks's real brother and family, or his son, is there. And so there's an interesting anecdote that's a real life anecdote about his brother and his son or his nephew, and like hitting as part of the joke of the scene, and almost as though the brother, as a father, was really getting upset at being hit that way. It's part of the scene, so it's almost like real life is spilling out from the film Real Life, which isn't really real life, but in fact it is, in sort of hidden details, so these Easter eggs types of things. So it's really great. And that's also shown through in some of the choices of the cast. I mean, there's some great detail. I mean, I mentioned Harry Shearer. There's also Jennings Lang, the very famous producer. Jennings Lang produced a number of films I'm a big fan of. And then also Nudies Rodeo and the like. And there's also a great deconstruction and explanation of a very funny scene. It's also, I think, it might be somewhat intense for certain viewers, which involves veterinary surgery and a horse. And so so Albert Brooks takes the time to talk about how the scene was filmed and being sure that the animal, the horse, was not actually harmed, and in fact there was an actual veterinary doctor on the scene, actually part of the scene itself. Um, that was interesting, and so it's nice to see how things are. In fact, there's certain real life elements, again, also being staged for the purpose of creating this film called Real Life. But also mentioning to speaking of performances, I should mention Francis Lee McCain. And also Charles Grodin, as Francis Lee McCain mentions in the second supplement interview as part of this release, and also how Albert Brooks mentions it here, Chuck. And they mention his name with great affection. And Charles Grodin. Charles Grodin is Charles Grodin is so great because he's got that great counterbalance of quality. He plays off of Albert Brooks's over the top nature so well, and this almost insultingly insufferable, affable nature that Albert Brooks's character just um, radiates. And so Charles Grodin, being a type of sort of placated victim in a way, and playing it so well, but also playing it almost himself in an over-eager type of way, and the blandness that's on display with the Mr. Yeager is played so perfectly by Charles Grodin. It's a it's a delicious performance, and Charles Grodin acts it out superbly. And Frances Lee McCain, again, we'll have the interview with Frances Lee McCain, the second supplement. She is so great as well, and that's another further counterbalance. Uh, there are some moments where her character is meant to almost be on the verge of I mean, what can be said to be on the verge of a nervous breakdown in terms of the incredible psychological stress that is taking its toll on her. And I think very reasonably so, because this is an incredibly intrusive, bizarre situation that she maybe her character didn't necessarily want to be in, but again, sway from the husband and also the Albert Brooks character in terms of the allure of fame, at least from certain perspectives. But still, she highlights the almost the underbelly of this type of reality TV entertainment approach, at least in the context of Albert Brooks, the character Albert Brooks's show here. But it's really great to see how her character changes, and how that too, as Albert Brooks mentions in this interview, how that might be said to be also a kind of reflection of something that, as Albert Brooks mentions from his point of view, oftentimes occurs, which is sudden affection, and people on set in this intense environment of trying to make a movie, and they suddenly have infatuation for someone else on the crew or something. And so there's a really interesting scene involving Frances Lee McCain's character, Miss Zager, and Albert Brooks's character. And it really shows sort of the dynamism of how her feelings and her sort of makeup are being affected by this incredibly stressful situation, and also how she's at some moments seemingly taking it in stride, but also being left with dealing with this absurd, over the top situation. And she, I think, responds in this very human way. So it's great performance, really wonderful. And Albert Brooks mentions this and applauds it, and I wholeheartedly agree. And so this is, I think, quite a good. Quite an excellent one-on-one interview with the writer, co-writer, or one of the writers and director, and one of the stars of the film, Albert Brooks, the artist extraordinaire Albert Brooks. So this is approximately 30 minutes, so please check it out if you can. It's really great. So that's the first supplement. The second supplement is Frances Lee McCain, so she plays Mrs. Yeager, Jeanette. And as I mentioned, if I press it, it doesn't go into a little extra descriptive part of the menu, but it will go straight into her one-on-one interview, which is approximately 15 minutes here. And this is also really wonderful. Frances Lee McCain, excuse me, is one of the great it's in many ways her character is kind of the beating, or one of the heartbeats of the film. She's one of the characters that really voices, or has opportunities to voice, a kind of concern and a kind of questioning this whole situation. It's a really odd situation. Do we really want to do this type of thing? And really expressing frustration and sometimes even anger at how things are going. And then also seeing how she is being affected, as I alluded to a little bit just a moment ago. That's a great performance. And so we get to hear a little bit from Frances Lee McCain herself, the reputation of Albert Brooks prior to being asked to play this role. And so she was very much willing and wanting to work with Albert Brooks. She really wanted to work with Charles Grodin, and so she, as she mentions it here, it was like you couldn't pass up this great opportunity. And she mentions how she had so much fun on the set, and working with Albert Brooks. It was very funny, and mentioning some scenes like him running across the street, even now, is just very funny to her. And also Charles Grodin being so supportive and so wonderfully clever and funny as well. So it's just, for her, Frances Lee McCain, just having such a fun time. I'm so sorry, I should mention too that Frances Lee McCain, at the outset of this discussion, or this interview, talks briefly about her career leading up to appearing in real life, and also a little bit later some roles, really famous roles that she has after Real Life as well. We'll get to that in a minute. But her work with TV and how that perhaps one of the shows that she was on probably caught the attention of Albert Brooks, which is she suggests is one of the reasons why she was able to get the part. And uh, she talks a little bit about how the film was shot, and Albert Brooks mentioned this as well. The film takes place primarily in Phoenix, but there were some exterior location shots of Phoenix itself. But for the most part, the interior of the house was, I think, shot, according to her and Albert Brooks earlier, in California, San Fernando Valley, according to her. And according to her as well, it was a low budget film, so she mentions this thing about working with the costume design and the makeup, but it was in fact her makeup, and she was asked, "Oh, what do you want to wear?" That kind of very very almost independent, almost guerrilla style filmmaking in a way. And so, but at the same time, she mentions how much fun she had, and it was like summer camp for her, which is a really great description. And also, I mentioned to her affection with working with affection for Albert Brooks and Charles Grodin. She mentions Chuck Grodin here. That's great. And also mentioning too the script. It was a really well scripted work, as she mentioned, and so there were moments of improvisation, but it was a tightly scripted film. And she describes her character as being, what does she say, on the edge of a nervous breakdown, which is a great description. Also, working with children, working with kids, she does mention this as well. She mentions too this concept of mansplaining, and how the word mansplaining wasn't necessarily in the lexicon in 1979, but there are some examples of that one can say from a kind of contemporary reading of real life. And she mentions this again from the viewpoint of her character. And as I mentioned too, it's really fascinating to see how her character, Mrs. Yeager, responds and reacts to these types of quite potentially unpleasant moments that she has to endure. So it's great. And then I mentioned to her, she mentions this, it's so iconic, her presence in incredibly famous or representative films from this was in 1979, going into the decade of the 80s. Gremlins, Footloose, Stand By Me, Back to the Future. And I would say, and I know her from all those films, and I would say in particular her performance in Stand By Me. If you know that film, Stand By Me, my goodness. And that's an interesting thing as well. Rob Reiner, and maybe coming all the way back to this idea of the mockumentary in real life. So, but any event, Frances Lee McCain. It's great to hear her perspective. And what a lovely conversation that she's having here. So please check this out if you can. This is approximately 15 minutes. And then the third of the supplements is right here, and I'm going to press it. It's called 3D Trailer, and this is of the three. This is the only one where if you press it, it'll take you to a little sub menu here. Did you see that? Now, again, maybe I'm so sorry for my bad presentation skills here, but let me read it out here. 3D trailer. The following trailer for Real Life was directed by Albert Brooks. This is approximately 3 minutes. So it's a trailer for the film, but it's a really such a creative trailer. It says 3D trailer, so that's the conceit. It's done in 3D, and it's calling attention to this new technology, or not new technology, but this technology of 3D and the 3D process and the blue and the red sort of shifted view of things that is applied as a kind of visual motif, as a visual style, and it's done for laughs. It's also a really interesting. It's its own little mini movie, which is great, and it's also paralleling real life in the way in which Albert Brooks is almost seen going overboard with the use of technology, much like his character in real life is going overboard with the overabundance of the bizarre camera technology. So that's so great. It's really great. It's its own little mini movie, and there's so many jokes to it. It's hilarious. So 3D trailer. Please check this out if you can as well. So that's we have the three supplements here. It might seem to some to be somewhat low in quantity of supplements, and if you feel that way, that's completely, I think, a legitimate criticism to make. I would have loved to have seen more with this. I don't think there's a commentary track or anything like that. It would have been great to have had that. Or other things, but that I don't want to take anything away from the greatness of these supplements that we already have. I've tried to express right now how much I'm very excited about those, and also this is you will see other Albert Brooks directed films in the Criterion Collection, and so there are other opportunities to explore other facets of the director, artist, actor, comedian, so writer. But it would have been nice to have seen more. Don't get me wrong, for this real life release. But for what we do have, and again, we have these supplements here, which themselves are really, really great. And so now let's take the opportunity to talk about other aspects, other contours of this Criterion Collection release, the physical media components of this. And so just want to take the opportunity to look at this great rendition here. Look at this, the real life portrait with Albert Brooks almost grotesquely out in front of the portrait there. And the wonderful green and yellow or slightly maybe olive color quality to it. And I also have the fold out insert here. It's the fold out insert, and I've mentioned it before. I'll mention it again. I don't like the fold out insert. I wish it could have been the staple booklet type, with the stapled and the many pages. But oh well, c'est la vie. But it does carry on this motif of the well, the family life and also the TV monitor type of shape and stills from the film. I love this look on Albert Brooks, by the way. That's really great. But you can also see too on the other side, which is the essay by A.S. Hamra. A young, honest guy like himself. This is a great essay. This is really great. It does go into some details. Okay, you should read. Oh, sorry. You should. I strongly recommend that you watch the film first, real life, and then you can read the great essay by S. Hamra, going into some details. Again, talking about the genesis of real life, sort of the providing the contextual basis of real life, diving into a great breakdown of certain of the the themes of the film, the plot points of the film, real life, and also there's some details about the inspiration for the film that haven't emerged elsewhere. So this is yet another great supplement to the supplements here that are part of the disc. So if you felt like the supplements were maybe, let's say, the number of supplements left you somewhat feeling that you wanted more, then you might see that this essay, I think, covers similar yet also different ground. So this essay, I think, goes so well hand in hand with what we already have with the Blu-ray supplements. So a great essay. Again, a young, honest guy like himself. So please check this essay out if you can. It's wonderful. I love these pictures, by the way. So now I will fold it back and I will open it up here. So I'm opening up just to give you the opportunity to see what the discs look like. It is this real life, the 4K disc and the Blu-ray disc and the stacked setup, and then putting the fold-out insert on the one side there like so, and then snapping the plastic case shut. And so there we have it. Real life. Albert Brooks's Real Life. Another great Albert Brooks film enters into the Criterion Collection physical media catalog. And what a fantastic film. The humor is spicy. It's also very relevant, and it's over the top. It's grand. It's absurd. It's just genius. And so, this is the film, which is Real Life. Okay, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies, including Real Life, including other films by Albert Brooks, including other films in the Criterion Collection and beyond. So until we see each other again, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.